Chapter 12 is really an interesting chapter because again it talks with it talks about a very small group of students that we're really not familiar with, and advocates for some things that really are strange. But there's some good nuggets here that pertain to the students you'll be working with. And the nice thing about advocacy, it'll be a natural fit for you as a teacher. And so one of the things Dr. Rojas Cortez lays out here is how to do that and how to recognize what that is. And so very interesting. And she brings a couple other people in here. The whole chapter, very agenda driven by Dr. Rojas Cortez here. But nonetheless, I say she makes some good points and tells you what it's about. I got my dose of this when I was working with special ed kids, of kids that really needed advocacy. And so, Chapter 12, Advocacy. Chapter 12, Assisting Parents with Child Advocacy, is interesting in that Dr. Rojas Cortez certainly authors with Dr. Eugenia Hepworth Berger, who was the original author of this whole entire textbook. But it's interesting here, they've added a couple other folks, which I think is quite interesting, and in a chapter that's maybe a little more challenging to explain. So let me take you on a little ride here where we're going. They're just pretty simple, straightforward objectives of this chapter. Just define advocacy, identify the issues for young children and their families, describe the power of advocacy, and provide steps for advocacy. And it will walk through that. So first of all, what is advocacy? Comes from the text here also on advocacy. Here's the overview. Around the world is a little bit interesting too, how they get into that, because one of the things they suggest is that we should mirror these in these other countries. Well, advocacy, strong belief and active involvement for a cause. And you understand advocacy also is not just this necessarily for children. The word advocacy comes from the word activists. And so we talk about activists, of course, you conjure up all kinds of thoughts like, environmental activists and social justice activists and abortion activists and, political activists. Well, this is a nice way of saying an activist here is advocacy for children, and maybe a more worthy cause. Numerous groups work to provide equal education opportunities for all children regardless of ability, ethnicity, or gender. And so it takes you right away where you start to wonder where this is going to come from or where it's going. They give you a little insight to it here about that. Parents advocate for their children by teaching about their cultural capital. Okay. Cultural capital there and how to best use it in the development. They give them their voice. Yes, and when I worked with special ed kids, I'd say one of my things I would tell them is they have to learn to advocate for themselves. In other words, speak for themselves. They have to recall the ecological system theory, in which different systems work together to help children achieve optimal potential. Understanding your role in child advocacy as educators and parents will help us fight for our children, but we must work together and give children a voice. And I don't think there's anybody in a bigger position to be an advocate for children than teachers. And so it goes with this whole chapter here. So what is it? That strong belief and active involvement in a cause. Advocacy grows from an emotional involvement. And they like to put that word in there. And involvement in the lives of a child, caring, recognition of need, and willingness to do something about its need. On both an individual level, the micro and social, macro for advocacy, ever present in teachers, I say. So you will be the closest of this, and you'll work with parents that are very scared and nervous about this, taking a stand for their children. And then it goes through a number of different organizations here, started by the Children's Defense Fund, and it lists a whole bunch of different ones that we'll take a look at later. All right. Okay. So here, the sleeping giant the issues of the new. Let me take you back where that's from. The issues of the new century vividly illustrate why children need advocates. The growing demand for this, and here's what I want you to bring in here, is quality child care, green spaces to play, along with increases in poverty, homelessness, and reports of incest and child abuse shout to the public. These social problems need a great deal of action to overcome the obstacles that children face. So here's our first one here. What are these issues of today? So I want you to fill that right here, our first input into our notes, these issues. Very interesting to me, and you and I can't relate to this, but this is one of the things that this organization advocates for, is green spaces to play. And that's a very interesting phenomenon to me. Okay, children, many challenges. They need to work, teachers, parents to work together to them to meet their individual needs. This is the inner city poor kids, but it's a very small percentage. Very interesting. So then she goes into these levels of advocacy. What are the levels? And it could be this case or class level, administrative or legislative level, or the public level. So first, this case or class action. You've heard the term class action? Like a class action lawsuit? That's what that's like at the class level. And then it gives you a demo there. And then administrative legislative level, bring change administrative. This is obviously what it is the government level. And then the public level. And what I want you to do now, this will be our second input, is I want you to bring those in. Tell me what those are here. This is our second one, number 2 here. These things here. Educate yourself, because there's a number of questions on the test. I think the first 5 questions on the test give you scenarios and ask you which of these pertain to it. Case or class action, administrative or legislative advocacy, and it breaks it in. Be ready for this. It breaks it between case and class, breaks it between administrative and legislative, breaks it between advocacy. I know this is all one, so really there's 3 here, but it kind of breaks into 5. So fill this in and educate yourself in those areas what they are. All right. And then the child advocate here. Often children need someone to have a voice for them. The advocate must grasp the needs of the child, the resources available within the school system, and the alternative resources outside the school system. And so again, I want to come back here and say, here those are. And I want you before here, number 3, I want you to tell me what this here was over here. These things right here. Grasp the needs, the resources here. I want you to bring that in there. The advocate must grasp the needs of the child, the resources available within the school system, and the ones outside the system. Then it goes into what these people do. And again, I think there's 3 or 4 questions on the test about these. So you need to become very familiar with these, because it'll give you scenarios, and it will come back with that. Okay. Questions about that, I hope? Right, here they are here. So like a question might be, a person that does this type of thing, it contributes at which of these levels? Yes, and this is you. I'm telling you, you'll just be a natural thing for you to want to advocate for kids what's best for them. And you'll see things and you'll sense things. Then it gives you these ways here, how parents can help and how teachers can help. But I'm going to do this a little different here. I'm going to clip these, I think. And so you have those because I want you to have these on your web page, how your parents and teachers can advocate in the following ways. I'm going to clip these together and have you put them in your web page also. Here's the rest of them here. Look for resources to children who have special needs. Ask the teacher and our social worker to help. Report these physical and sexual and emotional abuse. Attend meetings and speak out on issues. Become active in your community. Write and contact your legislators. Okay, so I'll give you those. And then what is the qualifications of a personal advocate? Well, essentially what qualifies a person to be a good child advocate is an intrinsic quality and truly being motivated for children. I believe there's a question on the test about that exact same thing. What's the essential thing? Intrinsic quality of being truly motivated to help children. Systematic, knowledgeable, and thorough. Advocate must be committed to finding out all the needs of the child and being helped. Although it's time-consuming, difficult, advocacy supported by the best available data is most beneficial to the community, parents, and schools. Okay, and then how do you prepare to be an advocate? Teachers advocate for their students when they see the children's needs are met. At times, this seems to be part of the role of the teacher. And that's what I'm saying to you. At times, it'll just seem like part of the role of the teacher. Okay. Need the literature to speak to expert. Need to read literature and speak to experts. And this is interesting too. Good advocates make sure their positions are based not on their own beliefs alone, but on the true needs of a child, a group of children, and a society at large. And I'm one like that. I can get carried away with that I can put my own values. And I gave an example of this the other day in a class, and I'll tell you, and you'll chew on this and spit this back at me, but one of the values I have, I would never let my kids wear shirts or anything like that that advertise beer or cigarettes or alcohol or marijuana or something like that. Now that's my value. Other families, without a doubt, would celebrate those things, and maybe that you would. But that's what can happen if we get our own values in here. And this is what you got to be careful of, because this is where I step in it sometimes. I can't imagine letting my children wear those kind of things, but many families would see nothing wrong with that and would celebrate those types of things. Okay, that's why you need to have support from other people, and so it's not just your own beliefs in here. And I think a little bit, of course, and I've ranted about this all along, that Dr. Rojas Cortez gets a little of her own beliefs in here at times. But to be an advocate here, the following guidelines describe the steps to take in working on individual advocate case. And again, first one is know your facts, and I think that's one of the test questions too. First thing is you must know your facts to be, putting together this individual advocacy case. But know the rights, know the facts, know the rights, know the policy, keep accurate notes, describe various options for them. Never go alone to a meeting with officials. Keep to the point when meeting with officials. Follow channels and send a letter. Those are those things here. And I want you, this will be our number 4 here, is just bring in a little note about each of these in here. And become familiar with this. As I say, I think there's the test on the question on the test starts with this. What's the first thing you need to know? Okay, so that's number 4. And then how help parents become advocates and active partners in schools. And this is where I think you need to fall, and that is getting the parents to be advocates for themselves so they recognize this. How can professionals ensure that parents will feel empowered and become involved? Following suggestions are adapted from a book on community mobilization from the Families of the Work Institute. Well, community mobilization really is community organizers. And so that's a nicer term than, say, community organizers, community mobilization. So they suggest these 4 things, and I'm going to ask you to grab those and talk about them. What are those 4 things on helping parents become advocates and active partners in schools? And so this is our 5th thing to bring into the notes. And you want to have an understanding of those 5 things here on having parents become, because there's a question on the test about that, about showing respect and advocating, having parents advocate. And how do we show respect? Promote feelings of confidence. Empowerments will be more comfortable and confident if they see how they can contribute. Okay. And then steps to take for public advocacy. You can write to federal officials is one. It has a nice long list here of what you can do. Talk and write with state legislators. Here's one. This NACY's Take Action link connects you to a legislator who can write a personal message. And there's a question on the test about NACY's and what level of, back in the level of government, NACY's takes what level. Then get involved before elections. Very interesting campaign for legislators who agree with your position on child care and advocacies in children. That's not really what they mean. That means campaign for their person, because that's an awful narrow issue. Is it too narrow? I don't know. You decide. Stay involved after elections. After election, invite officials to speak. And then join professional organizations in your regions. And I think the question on the test says, which is the easiest? And I think this is the easiest one, is to join professional organizations. And then get firsthand experience to visit those. So. And again, I'm going to make this number 6. And that is, you can put a note here for each of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them here, of what they are. And again, I say join professional organizations they claim is the easiest way to get involved in preparing for advocacy. All right. Very interesting again here. Possible advocacy topics. Possible advocacy topics. Think about this. Now, parents and educators can develop a list of possible topics to advocate for their children. Let's see. Again, I'm old and crabby now, but why, if the topics aren't prevalent, meaning coming easily, why would we have to stop and think about and develop a list? Can't we just work with the needs of the children? Do we have to come up with lists of what to do? Well, anyway, usually those topics have some type of immediate impact on children and their families. For example, parents of children with autism can advocate for sensory rooms in public libraries so that children with autism can also enjoy this community organization. I'm starting to, I don't see it in public libraries, but I see a lot of schools are starting to get sensory rooms for autistic children. And so it would only be natural that you're possibly going to have those in libraries. Another important topic many working parents highly need is universal kindergarten. Now, again, Dr. Rojas Cortez, I'm telling you that isn't widely accepted as she's making it here. And this is really, that's a very pretty term for preschool, mandatory preschool for somebody else's dime, that taxpayer's dime. So universal kindergarten is a topic of high debate. Oh, thank you for acknowledging that it is a topic of high debate. But some that can help alleviate many problems for working families. Activities that families can do, get this is so interesting, advocate for green space, including planting trees. Okay, look on page 326, including planting trees and working with government officials to stop unplanned development. Now, what? Advocate for green space, including planting trees and working with government officials to stop unplanned development. What does that mean? What's unplanned development, and what has this got to do with advocating for children? Okay, it goes on. Families can organize to plant trees and prevent from unplanned development to occur. Now, will you read that for me? Is this a typo? Could you give me your opinion on what this is about right here? A similar issue is the need to create accessible play environments for all children. You don't have to go here. But read this part from about here, activities that families can do. You explain that to me. Was that a typo or what? Let me take you back over here and see if I can find a spot for that. Yeah, let me just come back here, down here. Let's say this is number 7 here. And you tell me what they're talking about here on that. And, let's see, this is page 326, right here in the middle. Activities that families can do. Explain that to me. Is that a typo, or what is that talking about? I can't imagine that child advocates are getting involved with green space and planting trees so unplanned development doesn't occur. Sorry, I just don't get that. So page 326. You explain that right here, number 7. Okay. Accessible playgrounds, and our state is, I think, got very progressive with that. Many children in inner city do not enjoy the benefits of playground because their families are afraid to take them to the park for unforeseen dangers. Final issue. Okay, and again, we don't try and, as advocates, let's try and make them safer so we don't have unforeseen dangers. No, we're going to plant trees to prevent unplanned development instead. Development is what makes them safer. It's the lack of development is what makes them unsafe, Dr. Rojas Cortez, but whatever. A final issue may be advocate for the rights of immigrants. Now get this. Follow this. Where is this going? For the rights of immigrants. Can you guess where this is going for Dr. Rojas Cortez and where she comes? Now listen closely. What is this talking about? Very often we forget that many of us came to the United States to pursue a dream that others may also have that dream. Okay, that's great. Now listen here. Immigrants have the right to appropriate education, health care, and jobs. What is she talking about here? Why would you have to advocate for those things? Who is she talking about that you would have to advocate that they have appropriate education, health care, and jobs? Yes, you're right. Illegal immigrants. Because anybody that's born in this country that is a citizen has no problem. They don't need to have this advocated for. They already have appropriate education, health care, and jobs. Who needs advocate for this is people that are not immigrants, illegal immigrants that are undocumented. But that's her agenda. She doesn't state that here, but that's who she's talking about. And she backs it up with this. Together we can make the U.S. an even better place to live so that we can turn our advocacy lens on the rest of the world. So once we open our doors to all undocumented, then we'll invite people from the rest of the world. So I think Dr. Rojas Cortez really hangs her agenda out here, because if you're a documented citizen, documented in this country, you have appropriate education, appropriate health care, and appropriate jobs. That's available now. So very interesting. Then advocacy for children around the world. And again, I don't understand this. Can we not just focus on this? And here's why I think that's interesting. She goes right into this about Europe. Europe's been a leader in advocacy for children. The Council of Europe has been active since the World War II and over 50 years of work. Much of it's concerned with children and their rights. European countries also adopted the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there's a lot of reference to this, but here's why I don't have a lot of faith in this. Europe is burning right now. The countries in Europe are burning. They've overspent. They're in bankruptcy. They've put the burden of paying for all these things on too few people. I think sometimes that's why these advocacy groups get so carried away that somebody else should pay for all this. And I say so many of the European countries are absolutely on fire. And Dr. Rojas Cortez says we need to model what they're doing. Very interesting agenda. But anyway, this United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child, and anytime you get the United Nations involved, you know you're going to have chaos. There's a movement recognizing the need of rights of children. The United States has tended to be slower. See, we're going to criticize the United States for not following Europe into the fire, and Western Europe in implementing its legislations and policies support and protect children, but it's now making many of the same policy changes. Oh, good. We're starting to emulate Europe, who's on fire. As 2008, there are 29 states that have banned corporal punishment in schools, I think it means. The remaining 21 do not prohibit corporal punishment, and a majority of the children affected are African Americans and children with disabilities. Now, I went and followed up on these folks here, and it's very interesting. They just have this position paper about using physical activity as punishment or behavior management. Very interesting, but they don't. I couldn't find what this study was about. The Duper and Montgomery dingus here. I don't quite. Can't follow what that's about, but I can't imagine this, that African Americans and children with disabilities are affected by corporal punishment more than others. The majority of the children affected are African American. See, and oh, come on, Dr. Rojas Cortez, give me more substantive support for statements like that than just throwing that out there. I say I can't find this on here, Duper and Montgomery dingus. But then it goes through this, like the Office of Children's Ombudsman in the United States, and this is all about that. Talks about these things. States has this, and there's some questions out in the tests about this ombudsman here, what it is, and those types of things. So you want to do a study of this. Here's Europeans Network again, and what it is exactly. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it here, but you're going to. There's one question exactly for sure that asks you exactly what this is, and then over here we go into this into these burning countries again. But the United Nations Convention on Child's Rights here says children have the rights to education, and this is a question exactly on the test. What are the child's? This convention, what did they come up with? It said here's the rights children have. They have the right to education, rights in education, and rights through education. And there's another place here that another question says, what did this give them? Well, it says they have the right to participate in democracy. And it doesn't go here, but here it says right for refugees to obtain education without regard to the length of their stay in the country or legal status. Of course, that's undocumented. And that's what she, of course, is advocating for this country. The right to religious and moral education. Very interesting here that you would stick this in here or allow this to be in here, that this organization would allow this. Because in our country, this won't fly, can't happen. Well, I could. You just can't have this word religious in here. If you said have the right to moral education, then that would be, because then the government would tell you what moral is. But, you know, when the government gets involved in religion, you've got a big problem here, and that's what they're advocating here. This is a government agency. This United Nations is a government agency advocating for religious and moral education. Come on, Dr. Rojas Cortez, you got to be kidding me. And the right to come and go to school without extra costs. The right to go to school in a closed or a closet environment. And then it goes into about child care. Include the right to be protected from bullying or abuse by teachers, the right to complain, and to have those resolved. And then there's about 10 pages of charts like this, state by state, what they have. This one is about, do you have this ombudsman or advocates within state divisions of children and family services, independent ombudsmen for children's issues. And it goes through like 10 pages of that, of what all this is. Gives you a whole bunch of these, okay? And let's get up here to see if we can find our folks. Yeah. Alright, one more page or two here, and we'll get to our folks. There, South Dakota. Uh-oh! Dr. Rojas Cortez is going to be mad at us. Okay. And again, here's the one. Here again, it comes back to this United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children. Strong impact on the programs concerned about children's rights and their need to be protected. Need protection ranges from slavery and sexual violence, provisions of home and nourishment. In addition, the European Network is working on corporal punishment. You know, eliminating corporal punishment. Okay. Again, here I'm going to ask you here, and I believe this is our number 8 here, is to tell what this is, because I say there's a question right on the test says, what is this? So, you can have Europe, folks. I say they're burning to the ground with debt. And so that we want to follow Europe in anything doesn't make any sense. I say lots of talk about this United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. And they want to model a lot of their policies from that. And I'm just saying, just be very leery of anything the United Nations has anything to do with. Okay, rights of children in the Norway. I say here's what I was saying before, that Dr. Rojas says it's okay to have undocumented folks. Here's that religious and moral education. Very interesting. We'd emulate this. That this means that the federal government would advocate for this. I can't imagine it. Sweden, rights and safety of children. Austria. Okay. France. Latin America. Yeah. Now, like I said, there's a couple questions on the test about who's responsible in our country. Like, what level of government is responsible for education in our country? What level of government? Another one says, where do our rights in this country, come from? What is that document called that has our rights? Okay. That takes you all through that here. I want to find the one yet where it says that also it takes you to children have the right to participate in democracy because of this. Right here. Rights through education and democracy. That this United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the other things, but also gives them the rights through education include participation in democracy. This is what they're focused on, okay? So chapter 12, and you may want to take a look over this summary here. It does a nice job of this. Chapter 12, Assisting Parents with Child Advocacy.